beating up for.
Welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. Be quiet, Mr. Brisco. This is part 2, and I'm all excited. It is all about Mr. Jim Barnett. This is one of the craziest, wildest stories about one of the most integral parts in wrestling history. He's absolutely a pillar of wrestling, of what was built, but the story itself, from Rock Hudson to Lee Majors to the Kentucky football team to Australia to Ted Turner to Rupert Murdoch, it's absolutely insane. And we got wrestling's best historian, Mr. Tony Richards, with us to help us go through it all. Tony,
Wow.
welcome to the show.
Wow, what an introduction. Ooh, a lot to live up to. But we'll keep the standard high here. We'll try to get through.
Yeah, Tony, if anybody can live up to that introduction, it's you yourself, man. And what a first episode we had. What great feedback we got. You've been getting a lot of more information on the subject just from the little exposure that we've had so far. We think we're doing a historical show here with the 3-part series of the legendary Jim Barnett. But for those few that didn't catch that first episode, which you still can on Facebook, I don't know what is it, Don, on
YouTube, Jerry, YouTube,
YouTube.
It's on MySpace, is what it's on.
I just had some dental work done, so I got that stuff still running through the gas still running through my head. It probably will help me on this thing.
Yeah, but that's from the 70s. That's not from the dentist you just went to.
John. So I'll shut up, but let's kind of rehash it about Jimsy, and we affectionately called Jim Barnett back in the old days. Hey, Jimsy, and he loved that, by the way, too. He loved being called Jimsy, but we got to the end of his United States first part of his tenure with the Kentucky football team scandal and Lee Majors and Rock Hudson and just a plethora of stars that were coming to Lexington, Kentucky, or Louisville, Kentucky, back in the 50s, which was kind of an out-of-way place for a star like Rock Hudson to be going. So you kind of fill in the gap there, Tony, if you would, about the Kentucky part of this.
Sure. Well, a friend of mine, Ray Benson, with the Sleep at the Wheel. Are you guys familiar with that band?
Oh yeah, I love them. I love Sleep at the Wheel.
Yeah, Ray Benson calls it your tube. You can watch us on YouTube. I end up calling it YouTube because
one of my greatest favorite songs I think was done by them. Third Rate Romance over at Rendezvous. I love that song.
Yeah. You bet. Well, the Lexington, Kentucky was a very powerful town in regards to the Southeastern Conference. So I mean, the basketball team's got a long legacy, several national championships. Football team was good when Bear Bryant was there, but then they fell off somewhat. They had a coach in there that was everybody thought was a pretty good coach, and they thought they might have a decent season, but then for whatever reason, the powers that be decided to replace him with a Bear Bryant assistant. They thought, we can't get Bear. He's having big success at Alabama. He's about to put Joe Namath in the quarterback spot. We're never going to get him back. So maybe if we just hire one of his assistants, you see that in sports all the time. And they thought, well, we can make something happen here with the football program. Well, what that coach didn't know was that there had been activity going on around the football team starting around 1959. Where Jim Barnett had moved into town. He and Johnny Doyle had a red-hot promotion going and booking office that they had operated out of Indianapolis, but Jim had moved his personal residence to Lexington. And they were having a whole lot of success, and Jim was down there with his partner, Lonnie Winters, and they were driving around town, allegedly soliciting various college students, mostly of the male persuasion, sometime of the female persuasion, to liven up the party. And somebody that was also involved with that was an acquaintance that Mr. Barnett had made through entertainment circles, Rock Hudson. Lee Majors was a student at Eastern Kentucky University. He'd played at Indiana, which is just up the road in Bloomington, Indiana. He had transferred, I think, I told you guys in 60 or 61, and he graduated in 62, so this time frame fits. But he was also rumored to be around there, sometimes even as the driver of the car from Barnet. But John Langmead, and I'm going to put some of my colleagues over because
please do. Because
yeah,
John's a
Great
good
book.
friend of the show.
Great book, Ballyhoo. I love that
yeah,
book. My favorite
One of the
wrestling
best
books of all
ever.
time.
you bet. And John's a great guy. He's
Yep.
and he sent me a message and told me about this Rock Hudson biography called "All That Heaven Allows," and this came out in right before COVID, around that time. And there's a chapter in the book called "Strange Bedfellows," and in that chapter, I just read a little bit of it to you. It says, what prompted Hudson to make repeated visits in Lexington at the very height of his career is a big mystery. Was it a sudden interest in thoroughbred horses that drew a big movie star to a city known as the horse capital of the world? The most common thing you hear is that Rock was in Lexington because of horses. The horse industry draws a lot of prominent people to the area, and someone of Rock's stature being in Lexington for that reason wouldn't be that surprising. Although Rock's mother was known to play the horses, Hudson himself is not remembered as an especially devoted horse fan. There's another frequently repeated and local and socially acceptable explanation for Rock Hudson's interest in the bluegrass state. While Elizabeth Taylor was on location in central Kentucky with MGM's Civil War saga Raintree County, Hudson paid her an extended visit. This movie was largely shot in Danville and Paducah, Kentucky, but Rock took the opportunity to explore other parts of the state wherever Taylor was before the cameras. While sightseeing, he drifted over to Lexington and found it to his liking. The third and most plausible reason for Rock's connection to Lexington has only recently come to light. The story that most people haven't heard is that Rock Hudson was friends with a gay couple from Chicago, John Hill and Estelle Wilson, and they opened a bar in Lexington called the Gilded Cage, which was Kentucky's first actual gay bar. I knew a lot of the older homosexuals in town, and I heard that Rock Hudson was one of the owners of this gay bar, says Lexington historian Robert Morgan. That was the rumor going around for many years. What more likely is that he was close friends with the people who owned the bar. Probably their name was on the business, but his fingerprints were in there somewhere with financing of the bar. Or when he came to town, he had a sizable amount of money on the bar to basically make it his clubhouse while he was in town. Although it may have been through his Gilded Age connections that Rock Hudson became acquainted with Mr. Jim Barnett, who, like Hudson, was a study in a contradiction. And this part's not inaccurate, but it says a former wrestler turned professional wrestling promoter, Barnett was openly gay and remarkably successful in what was typically an utter macho field. The Oklahoma native was very witty and very dapper, and has once been described, and by the way, I think it was your brother that described him this way, the Noel Coward of the National Wrestling Alliance. Those who knew Barnett remember him as an unforgettable figure, a rare individual who could discuss headlocks and chokeholds as knowledgeably as he could expound on Picasso and Mozart. Barnett was very well off, having been one of the most successful pioneers of television wrestling. Even so, he liked to give acquaintances the impression that he was even more wealthier than one might have guessed. Whether he actually came from old money or not, Barnett, who was typically attired in a three-piece suit, excluded an heir to the manor born. In other words, he was born wealthy. So what if the Rolls Royce he rode around in was borrowed, or that the driver was some college boy that was hard up for cash? After Barnett and his longtime companion Lonnie Winter moved into a luxurious residence on North Lakewood Drive in Lexington, it was not only open house, but open season. Some couples began inviting college football players, hoopsters, and other athletes over for parties. That's how the whole scheme started, said Shannon Raglan, who wrote the other book we talked about on the last episode, The Thin 30. It didn't quite begin as sinisterly as you would have thought. Jim and Lonnie had these amazing parties. They had the best food. They had the best drink. Why wouldn't you go to this thing? Initially, I don't think it was a quid pro quo situation. At first, it was about getting these athletes comfortable and dependent. Obviously, Jim and Lonnie were interested in the better players, the stars, if you will, but they took what they could get. At these parties, they keep an eye open for boys of meager means and ones that seemed conflicted. In addition to plying the young jocks with lobster, unlimited booze, and stag films, Jim and Lonnie showered their favorite boys, or at least the most obliging athletes, with expensive gifts like suede jackets, leather shoes. This was heady stuff for a poor boy from Louisville or Harlan, Kentucky. Of course, Lonnie and Jim's interest in these footballers wasn't altruistic, says Ragland. They wanted to have sex with these guys, and they were willing to spend them from they were able to spend from their considerable fortune to accomplish that. Some of the athletes enjoyed the free food and drinks without succumbing to the sexual advances of their hosts, while others were more amenable. At some point, the exchange of sexual favors for lavish gifts turned into what Ragland describes as a more pedestrian and more base prostitution scheme with respect to the more willing young men. Each year, new team members were invited to the house on Lakewood Drive in an effort to indoctrinate them. Amazingly, the entire scheme was anything but a carefully guarded secret. Everybody knew about Jim and Lonnie, says Ragland. It was a well known among Central Kentucky college athletes. All this was going on. As crazy as it sounds, it was not a secret. While not denying that these parties occurred, historian Robert Morgan and others take exception with the portrayal of Barnett and Winter as diabolical predators. The way that the story's always been presented is that these naive young men accidentally fell in with this band of vicious homosexuals who were exploiting them. I know people who are at these parties, and that's not the way it was at all, says Morgan, referring to the most receptive of the college guests. Morgan explains, one not so old gay person I know was at these parties and involved with a lot of the football players. People that were there have said everybody was having fun and really enjoying the sex. As incredible as it sounds, the number one box office attraction in the world may have joined the party in the early 60s. Among the locals, it soon became common knowledge that Rock Hudson was a regular guest at the Lakewood House. A social climber without equal, Jim Barnett loved nothing more than to be able to announce to his athletes, Rock will be joining us for the weekend. Whenever Rock Hudson arrived at the Cincinnati airport, Barnett would dispatch the Rolls Royce borrowed from Sam Miniker to pick him up. While several University of Kentucky players have confirmed that Hudson regularly attended the parties, they have been reluctant to say much more.
Wow.
Now, so was Hudson, now he met him in, it sounds like in Lexington, right? So Hudson was spending a little bit of time in Kentucky, or did he meet Jim Barnett somewhere else?
So the way this just read was that Elizabeth Taylor was filming that movie Raintree County in Kentucky, right, and it was down where I'm from in Western Kentucky, in Paducah. And Rock came in to see her. Like they had a on the surface
and there happened to be a
relationship.
gay bar, which is probably not that prevalent in the world at that time.
But that gay bar is 3.5 hours away. So Rock kind of ventured away from Paducah over to central Kentucky to Lexington just to check things out. And
I understand that, but
this also says he was an investor. So that kind of part of the story too, John. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that if you hear about good bars when you're into bars, whether you're into women or men or whatever it is, you hear about good bars, and so. Sure. You would hear about this bar down in Lexington because it's so unusual to have something like this in Kentucky, right? So it makes sense that all of a sudden that they probably did meet that way surreptitiously somehow at the gay bar or in Lexington somewhere.
Well, I know
it was always my understanding that Joe met Rock Hudson in California when he was going out there to meet with those people out there.
I don't know exactly where their connection comes in. That's kind of
how they had a connection.
Yeah. And when I was living there in the 80s, that stuff was going on a lot. We're talking about here in the late 50s and early 60s. That was this was the first bar, it said. When I went over there, everybody kind of went there because it was after hours bar. So when the regular bars shut down, everybody still wanted to party. They went over to one of these places, and
to one of the gay bars.
Yeah, and wouldn't think anything about it.
Was Lexington known for this?
Probably just within people that live there.
No, I'm just asking. I
don't know because I lived in Kentucky and we kind of knew about it.
Yeah. You guys know about that being a gay bar and all that.
Because to your point earlier, people know about the bars, right? Where you can go.
Sure, and bars tend to congregate in certain places. You got you got your cougar bars, you got your sports bars, you got your
and you know
all
and
kinds
you
of
and you know the hours of the bars, and you know the
yeah,
ones
yeah.
that stay open late, and you know that when you get out and you're on a roll and you don't want to quit, you don't care what kind of bar you're going to, just give me a
Good
bar,
Lord, no.
Well, yeah.
Good
Well,
no.
when I was in school in Stillwater, Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State University in the mid-60s, the closest gay bar that we heard about was 200 miles to our south in Dallas, Texas. So that was the closest gay bar to us.
So I think the
Why
other
would you bring that up?
Well, we're talking about learning about bars, when we're in school.
That's because in Texas we're very inclusive. We welcome all people,
Well, good for you, John.
unlike you damn Okies.
So there's one little piece more here. He says Phyllis Gates told Rock that his promiscuity was going to adversely affect his career. He needed to stop doing some of these things. And she said, the whole town of Los Angeles is talking about your stuff that you're doing. And it says, but that was in Hollywood. In Lexington, Kentucky, behind closed doors, Hudson obviously felt like he didn't have to worry about that. Overall, he was among friends, he thought. So Rock was in for a rude awakening. It seems that a professional athlete with whom Hudson had a brief weekend fling had stars in his eyes. I got a call from this guy one day, recalled Wilson's secretary, Betty Butler, and he said he wanted to talk to Henry. I asked him why, thinking he was just another actor who wanted to sign with the agency. Instead, he told me that he had proof that Rock Hudson was a homosexual. In exchange for bearing any incriminating evidence, the ambitious young actor wanted what any guy blessed with leading man good looks and backwater sex appeal wanted. He wanted to be a movie star. So the assistant, after sizing up the athlete, could only agree that he definitely had potential. As usual, Rock had impeccable taste. And with him pulling strings behind the scenes, he would be he would take the would-be blackmailer, and that would go on, he would go on to make his uncredited screen debut in a B film. And thanks to Henry's unique brand of damage control, Rock had dodged yet another bullet. So he got these people coming out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, Rock kind of gave me these promises, and if you guys don't help me, I'm going to go public with this." And they always kind of seem to manage it.
Were there anything that went public out in Hollywood about this establishment in Kentucky?
I don't think any of this really came out. I mean, I think it came out that Rock was a homosexual back in.
I mean, yeah, there was always the rumors and innuendos that are.
But all this stuff surfaced after 2000, like all these resources we're talking about and these books and all that. That Thin 30 came out just maybe 10 years ago, and this book here just came out before COVID. So I don't think it's been widely talked about much.
We talked in the last episode about Pat Patterson and Freedom of Information Act. David Bixenspan dug up a lot of stuff about how J. Edgar Hoover had a file on Pat Patterson, tried to throw Pat out of the country for being a gay man. And was there anything like this with Hudson or with Jim Barnett that you know of?
No. And I want to go back to this Thin 30 book here and read a piece of this to that point. Shannon Ragland in the Thin 30 says that Coach Bradshaw promptly addressed all the sexual issues with the team in a meeting held at the practice center. He told the players without addressing Lonnie and Jim directly that all this crap that had happened at the Lakewood house and anyone known to be going out to the Lakewood house is going to face the strictest discipline and be hustled out of this program. It was delivered with a fatherly tone, one of love and compassion, but it was still delivered very sternly. Everyone knew what he meant and nothing more about it was said. It was not known how or precisely when the head coach made the connection between the sex and the gambling, and if that connection was immediately known. Bradshaw, while he did discuss the sex matter with his players, and Boone never said anything to any of his assistants or players about the gambling. He handled it so quietly that no one ever knew, not the university administration or even the athletic director. Bradshaw just brought it all to a big, quick end. And it's also known that in 1963, prior to this scandal, that Lonnie and Jim enjoyed some level of police protection at their home on Lakewood Drive.
Wow.
It's probable that Tommy Bell would have enlisted the full faith and credit of the Lexington police, operating through the chief, attempted to close down the Lakewood house without fully revealing what had happened there. Bell might also have been involved as a prosecutor who could have wielded a big hammer too. Whether the police or a prosecutor played a role in 1963, it is known that Lonnie and Jim really left town quickly. They didn't have to get out of town. They didn't just get out of town. They went halfway around the world and took themselves to Australia.
Wow. One thing that's interesting about this is, Rock Hudson, we got to explain, he was the hottest actor in the world at the time, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's that connection with Elizabeth Taylor. They'd been in Giant. That's one of the biggest pictures in 1955, 1956.
James Dean. That's James Dean big.
That's his, yeah. And so that's her deal in all this. And Rock Hudson, he is huge star, John. Big star.
So he's flying out to Lexington, Kentucky to be with this wrestling promoter and go to this wrestling promoter's parties. I mean, this is insane connections that Jim Barnett had. But then is this innocuous with Lee Majors that he just happened to be the driver?
He was just
any idea?
I mean, he was a football player, so he was an athlete. And he lived in close proximity. I mean, most of the, I was a college athlete in Kentucky. I was friends with Rex Chapman. We all knew each other, and I'm assuming it was that way 20 years before. I mean, you just know guys.
I mean, you've got the $6 million man. You got the hottest movie star in the freaking world, and you've got the best wrestling promoter in the world right now, all together in of all places, Lexington, Kentucky. It's nothing against Lexington, Kentucky. I was just there. Great city, but it's just not the epicenter of the universe.
Right. But if you are operating in a way where you don't want to attract attention, wouldn't that be where you'd want to be? You'd want to be you'd want to be out of the spotlight, right? You'd want to be in a place that not a lot of attention. I mean, obviously Rock wasn't doing it in Hollywood. And if he was, they told him, you're doing too much. Like, you got to calm this down. Well, I mean, that seems like that would be a good place to do it because that's off the radar somewhat.
So has any of this been brought up extra about Lee Majors in history since then?
No, I don't
Lee
think
involved in the parties, and does anybody know? I don't want to throw any shade at the $6 million man because I love the $6 million man. I have no idea, and I don't care if he was part of it or not. I just interested.
But Lee was just being from around there. I've always known he's a big horse lover. Him and William Shatner both, Captain Kirk. I mean, they're big horse guys in Lexington and had these big houses. Lee Majors built a house that looked like a castle in Lexington, this huge horse farm. So he obviously liked it there and went back and lived there a lot. But none of this has ever been talked about.
I understand he liked it there, but he's driving around the puppet masters to this sex orgy that they're having. So I understand he likes it there, but he's at the epicenter of all of this shit going on.
He's right there. Yeah.
Not that he did anything good, wrong, bad, or indifferent, but
we don't know.
He had to know. And he's passed away long since. It doesn't matter, but he had to know.
I'm sure he had some. Well, if he was driving the car somewhat, sure. I mean, he went to the house. And if you went to the house, you probably saw everything that was happening. You
saw you saw the punt team for the Kentucky football team.
Now, and you probably had to drive a few of them home occasionally too.
Yeah, and then the question then becomes like, who's participating in what? Because you've got a veritable smorgasbord of things you could be doing in the house.
So was there anybody else? I mean, not that we need anybody else, but you got Rock Hudson, the biggest star in the freaking world.
Yeah.
I mean, did anybody come with him? I mean, was there other actors that, hey, let's go to Lexington? They got a sex parties there that are really fun.
Well, if you're watching this episode right now and you were there in the house, we want you to contact us.
Please let us know. Or if you have information on it, please let us know.
Yeah, we want to talk to you. So, I mean, the way that those two books describe it, I mean, you could have been going there because you wanted to eat. You could have been going there because you wanted to drink. You could have been going there because you wanted a girl because there were girls there. You could be going there just for whatever reason, or you could have been going there for the obvious reasons.
Yeah. With the Lakewood house, which it became known better than Barnet and Doyle's residence, it was the Lakewood house.
Now, I don't know if Doyle was there or not.
Okay, well, the police had to have some type of inkling what was going on there because these lavish parties going on. I mean, you can't throw a huge party like that in Lexington with Rock Hudson without somebody in the press.
Yeah, but Jerry and I, also in fairness, I think it was predatorial and I think it was wrong, but drinking age was either 18 or 19 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like there was underage drinking or anything.
Okay.
Drinking age didn't change when I was when I was 19, the drinking age was 19, so it
Yeah,
was
and that's by
a different world.
that's by the strictest thing of the law, and it was different in different places. Like in Kentucky, most everywhere was dry except Lexington and Paducah.
Wow.
So you went to those places because that's where the liquor was. When I went to school at Murray State University, we went across the border to Tennessee because Murray was dry and Tennessee was wet. So we had to drive 6 miles across the border to go to a bar to drink. So it just, that was a magnet too at the time.
Jerry, you've been to parties. I guarantee you have been where you go when you're in college or you're young or whatever else, and there are a lot of girls there. There's a lot of music there. There's also some predators there, and you know
Yeah,
that.
you don't know what's going on there,
You have
basically.
no idea. You're there. You could be there.
You're there to fit your genre, not
That's
to
right.
pay
You're there.
attention.
You're there to get your own freak on.
That's right.
Whatever that is, and
Yeah,
drinking
well,
or chasing women or whatever it is. You're not there to.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
You
million different
want the
reasons.
food and the free food, free food and free drink when you're in
Oh my
college. They
God!
don't care.
You tell a college kid we got free food and free booze,
Yeah.
and
and
there's
you're
gonna be
looking
women there.
and you're
That's all you
looking
need
for
to
the
know.
person.
And by the way,
John,
Rock Hudson's there, and it wouldn't have mattered. He said, and he may hit on you. Who cares? It's Rock Hudson.
you want to go to all your 18, 19-year-old friends and go, hey, guess who I hung out with this weekend?
Yeah.
Right.
Rock. No
Whether
rock.
So
anything
then when the
else
hammer
happened,
fell, that's when they end up. Now, did Hudson? Hudson never suffered any repercussions from this. It was just Barnett, right? Barnett was the one that had to get out of the country.
well, I don't know that he even hit any repercussions. I think he just thought the heat was on. It was time to leave Dodge, And not only did he do that, there was this business opportunity that came up that just happened to be a good one, and it was like it fit right in to go to Australia and get out of the country.
But Tony, they were about to control the whole North America. It sounds like. I mean, they were
Well,
close to being
yeah,
national, being the first.
they,
National, they were that good, right?
they
And
were close to controlling the largest area of the country, one single promoter. Yes.
Right.
and so they're leaving a bird nest on the ground to go somewhere else. So it sounds like there was a little bit of heat there. They thought, you know what, I really don't want to deal with this.
But think about this. Think about it in a Vince mentality or in a Doyle and Barnett mentality where, okay, we have conquered as much as we're probably going to conquer because we've run into this wall in Los Angeles. We're not going to get that, right? They've fortified the fort. We're not going to penetrate it. We're not going to penetrate St. Louis because that's Muchnick. And at the end of the day, we're not members of the NWA, but we kind of want to be friendly, right? We don't want to really go to the East Coast because Vince McMahon Sr.'s been good to me. I've worked with him in Washington, so we can't go that direction. We can't do, they're already booking for Crockett, so that relationship's already in place. So they're like, okay, if our end goal was to conquer a country, it's not going to be this one. So now we see another opportunity where we can accomplish that goal. We can conquer a whole country. So I think
and walks Jack Little with an opportunity presentation.
Yeah. I think it was more that, John. I think it was kind of like, okay, if running a national wrestling promotion is our goal, we're probably not going to be able to do it here, but we will be able to do it over there. I think that was kind of why they left what they left. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, it does. And so it may be, and this is, I think, important to history. It may be that they took the opportunity to go to Australia because of the opportunity, not necessarily because of the problems that were behind in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, possibly.
because
Whereas a lot of
people, people want to tell the history, and maybe that history is true. That's why I'm at. It's more of a question that they had to leave Kentucky and to go to Australia because the fire was getting too hot on them. Which
I think they did have to leave Kentucky, but they didn't have to leave the promotion. They just left the goings on there, right? I think if Barnett would have moved back to Indianapolis and the authorities in Lexington and the coaches in Lexington would have kept the kibosh on it like they did, he probably would have been fine staying here. I don't think anything could have happened because, and I think I mentioned to you guys that well, actually, that was John Langmead. Also, he sent me the FBI report on Jim Barnett when he.
I was going to ask you about that too.
When he was being nominated by Jimmy Carter in 1980 to be on his presidential council. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in the FBI. There's all the people they talked to. They talked to a whole bunch of people in his past. They talked to the people in Lexington that he had credit with and bankers that he did business with and lawyers and attorneys and real estate people. and there's nothing.
Because
No one.
unless you can prove
Now sometimes we should say this. Sometimes there's nothing in there because the right questions weren't asked. And sometimes there's nothing in there because there was nothing to say, right? So you just kind of got to think which one was it. But the important thing is there was no evidence in the FBI investigation that this ever happened.
Yeah, but in fairness, I think it was predatory, and I think it was a piece of shit thing
Sure.
with these kids that were, obviously
I
had
agree
taken
with you.
advantage of them, and the
I agree
college
with
did not help those kids at all. But legally, there may have been nothing illegal about it because these were grown people by legal definition. They were all 18 to 19 years old or older, so it wasn't like you're dealing with minors. I still think it's wrong, but legally there may not have been anything illegal that was done, right?
Right, and it was certainly in 1959 to 1963, it was not socially acceptable. It was very damaging, a very bad PR situation as well. And while it might not have been something you could have been legally charged with, it was something that nobody wanted out there for sure.
Right, but my point is that may be the reason that there wasn't something in the FBI file, and it may be the reason that the authorities didn't go
because
after
there was no actual law broken.
because there was no law. It seems like there may have been no law actually that was broken. So there's nothing really to go after them. I mean, you're just like, these are bad guys. They're obviously paying for favors and trying to trying to manipulate these young kids. But
but on the same token, Pat Patterson just he wasn't involved in no sexual scandals like that. With college kids, and they had an FBI file on him.
Right, they had one on him, and Pat certainly Pat was Pat
sure
never had anything like I mean,
right.
You would think there would be one on Jim Barnett, not on Pat.
Well, yeah. I would really like to think, and part of this is that it's my home state. I grew up there. I would really like to think that the prosecutor and the sheriff and all those people would not overlook a blatant law breaking situation. So to your point, John, maybe there wasn't anything done there.
Right.
Right. There may have been not much they could do. They basically just say, man, you're going to have to get out of town. You know how a small town sheriff or an old school sheriff would say, you're going to have to get out of town, get your ass out here. I don't want to see you here anymore.
I'm tired of dealing with this.
I want you out. Dealing with it.
I want you out of here.
Right. So
the university did such a fantastic job of just putting a hush on it too. I mean,
the coach did. The coach did. Yeah,
and let's make it straight. Bradshaw is any relation to our co-host here?
It's no relation. There's no relation.
Not that I could trace down. I went to genealogy.com. I didn't see anything.
Well, Charles Bradshaw, the premier name.
Yeah. So perhaps there wasn't, and the reason I think that is because that nothing's in the FBI report, and those guys' job is to find stuff. They're not there to confirm you. They're there to disconfirm you, right? If you're going to be working for the president.
It just seems crazy to me that Hudson was such a big star, so well connected, and nobody came with him. I just think they probably did. It just probably wasn't, that we know about.
One star level enough. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got a guy out there that says, hey, man, I'm going out to these crazy wild parties out in Kentucky. And he had to be, I would think he would be telling people.
You would think. You would think that more and more people would be talking about it too, but it was a hush thing. Wow. Just people just decided we'll just pretend like all that stuff didn't happen.
Right. So then, what was the progression then for Jim Barnett? So he gets rather the same time, fortuitously, he gets this offer to come down to Australia, and is that when he first takes the first exploratory trip to Australia?
Yeah. So Doyle and Barnett hear from this L.A. Television commentator that used to work for Johnny Doyle named Jack Little. He's now working for Channel 9 in Melbourne, and he's connected with some of the television wrestling, and he's telling Doyle, based on what they used to do in the United States, that this is awful. Like, this is terrible. You need to come over here. You guys would be toting money in wheelbarrows if you came over here, And so Doyle and Barnett go to Australia. They take a tour. They go around to all the registered.
Tony, let me cut you. They go to. Is this before they sell out their territory? They're not forced to sell anything when they leave Kentucky. They're still still manipulating most of the country at the time.
Yeah, they go. This is an exploratory trip to confirm, right? They're going to trust but verify. So they trust what Jack Little's saying, but they want to go see it for themselves. So they go to Australia, they take a tour, they look at all the wrestling clubs, they look at the presentation, they look at the wrestlers, they look at everything, and they're like, this Australian wrestling is terrible, and this is not very good, and we can take our American style wrestling and bring it in here and really clean up.
And so what was then, did the territory, was it a solid territory of all Australia at the point?
No.
Were they buying the territory from somebody?
No. It was a bunch of little wrestling promotions that were running around the major towns and some of the small towns. And so they were coming in as a consolidated force to run it as a territory. They just saw a bunch of the smaller promotions they could squash.
So they're not.
They didn't have to buy anybody out.
They're coming in to take over. They're not buying nothing.
Right. They're an invading force with a national vision. And so they come back to America. They decide to close what they have here and put a 100% focus on Australia. They make this deal where they trade off and they tell each other, you live in Australia for 6 months and I'll live in the United States, and then I'll come back and I'll take over for 6 months and you can take a break. And that's what they do for the next several years. They decide to sell Detroit and Cincinnati to the Sheik. The rumor is they got about 50 grand from the Sheik for it. That I haven't been able to confirm that, but that's kind of been what's talked about around the last few years. And they sell Indianapolis to Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder, and they sell Denver to Vern Gagne as part of the AWA.
Now, did Johnny Doyle at any point pull Jim Barnett aside and say, please don't end up with the Australian football team?
I haven't heard that. I don't know.
I just wonder.
I wish there would have been more people back then. We didn't have historians and authors or anything in 1960, whatever, nobody was talking to that. Johnny Doyle is just like this guy that most fans now or people now just have never heard of.
That's so too important. Johnny Doyle who's Johnny Doyle? How's he play into this thing? Well, we come to find out, Johnny Doyle was a big time player in our business that you're right, nobody knows about.
I mean, in the research and stuff that I've been involved in the last several years, there are these group of guys that a lot of people just don't know a lot about that were some of the most powerful guys in wrestling. Doc Sarpolis is one of them. Right. I posted something about his death the other day and talked about all the things that he had done in the business. And another person followed up with it and go, well, he was a good influential wrestler. And I'm like, he was a little bit more than that, Yeah. But I mean, you think about guys like Sarpolis, you think about guys like Doyle, you think about guys like even Fred Kohler is not really that noted in history. Roy Welch isn't that noted in history. No. Morris Siegel isn't noted. I mean, these are all super power brokers in the business. And
Jerry,
because
when you were down in Australia, or did you hear any of this rumor about Barnett and the Kentucky football team, Rock Hudson, or any?
Yeah, well, Australia, yes, I did. I mean, it was pretty well known because I was where did Tony go? I was a college guy, and they were always, hey, did you have any parties like they had down there? That's where I first heard about. I mean, when I went down there, of course, my brother told me Jim was homosexual, and watch what I did around him and all that stuff. But when I got there, the talent, they would talk about Jim in hushed tones, of course, but the Kentucky football team, that's one of my first wrestling scandals that I ever heard about.
So the boys knew about this.
The boys knew about it. Yeah, the boys.
Holy cow! The boys can't keep a secret for nothing. This is pretty shocking. Now, did they know about Rock Hudson?
Neither.
Yeah. Rock Hudson and Lee Majors. They were talked about a lot in the locker room stories. Yeah.
So
more so than what we're talking about. And more graphic terms.
I would, yeah, of course, in more graphic terms. Yeah, absolutely,
It's a locker room.
Because when all you gotta do is see Rock Hudson on TV and go, "That's who
Yeah.
Jim Barnett is."
That's Jim Barnett's guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, and Lee Majors too. So you guys were.
Yeah.
This was
We
all
also
scuttlebutt backstage.
There was no secret. No.
The other thing about those guys we were talking about is they all died before the video era. So recency bias kicks in, and as generations go on, as people that follow wrestling go on, they have certain points in history they reference back to, and that's getting shorter toward the future and longer toward the past, where the past people are fading away.
I just think it's amazing that Jerry knew all about all this, and all the boys did too, and it's just somehow it stays semi-hidden for decades.
John, you know the deal to wrestling business, man. You're making money from somebody, you don't give a damn. I mean,
you can care less. Jerry, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I just it had to be though that you guys are down in Australia working with this guy, and you see Rock Hudson in a movie, you're going, "Oh, dude, that's the guy our promoter's with."
And every time we would see Jim with a power broker, an Australian power broker, of course, the innuendo was there that this guy's a gay guy, doing Jim a favor, Jim doing him favors. I mean, there were always those little things like that, that you picked up.
Of course.
On, but
gossip's the most fun thing in the world, especially, Jerry, before you have cell phones and internet. You guys don't have nothing else to do. All you got time to do is gossip.
Yeah. But nobody cared. Nobody cared what.
No, I wouldn't think they would, but it had to be fun, though.
Yeah, well, it was really good, especially for a young college guy coming out of college and hearing all this scandal. Because, like I said, in Stillwater, we didn't really have a lot of gay people around there.
Well,
that I knew of anyway.
Well, Jim Barnett's the most imitated guy in professional wrestling. I mean,
yes,
there's a reason why. There's a reason why. I mean, he was just so flamboyant, and people talked about him. They talked about him when he was around, and now they're still talking about him 24 years after he's dead.
So the biggest thing is they'll pop the territory. All these idiots say, "Oh, we're gonna pop the territory." I always hated that phrase because it was always some idiot that probably shouldn't be on the roster talking about it. But when they popped the territory, what was the first thing he did down there in Australia to do that?
So they first thing they did was they presented themselves as a worldwide brand. So this is where the phrase World Championship Wrestling first occurs, is in Australia. They come in, and actually I didn't mention, but in the name of their company when they were in the States was World Championship Wrestling. So when Doyle and Barnett partnered and they started doing the Cincinnati, Detroit, and all that stuff, they were World Championship Wrestling then. And so they keep their brand name and they bring it to Australia. The other thing they do is they stop doing Australian type matches that were presented in rounds like boxing.
Yeah.
And they presented them as American style, that like we know about, that were time limit based, where you just wrestle straight through. Well, immediately in the perception of the fans, this is like people now with nonstop high spots, right? Because the old slow Australian thing that would stop down every minute and a half or whatever for a rest period, now it's going straight through for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And people in Australia are just going wild. They're like, man, this is action-packed and awesome.
Before we get to the setup there, describe the television setup there. I mean, Channel 9 was the nationwide TV. How long were they nationwide when Jim first went there, or did they become nationwide?
Channel 9 was nationwide, and that's what that's what got his attention was that if Johnny Doyle and Jim Barnett come over here and get on Channel 9, this will give them access to the whole country and presenting a much better product. And that's exactly what happened. They got on Channel 9 in Melbourne. They started running Sydney, Melbourne. They started running Brisbane. And the television station was reaching all those places. Plus, they got local TV in those markets, too. And that Channel 9 show was on Saturday and Sundays at noon every weekend. And then they'd run all week on that. And the other thing Barnett would do for the boys, I mean, as a businessman, he flew everybody between cities. He didn't have anybody driving. They weren't traveling in cars anymore. They were going first class in airplanes to every city in the country. And that was a big upgrade for a promoter.
The rumor was that Jim owned part of TAA, Trans Australian Airlines.
You bet.
Tony, do you know what the rounds were? Were they 5-minute rounds before?
Something like 3 to 5 minutes. I can't remember exactly.
I remember when I went down there in, I think, 71, Australia, of course, had gone to American style, but we went, and Jim would send us over to New Zealand. And New Zealand was still on the round system over there. And they were 5-minute rounds with a minute and a half or something like that in between the rounds.
Yeah.
And there was a wrestling organization, a governing body called the IWA in San Francisco, and they affiliated with them for their world heavyweight title. And so,
any idea why they chose that one?
Because they couldn't get into the NWA.
NWA, okay.
Yeah, so they just found one that they could work with that would work with somebody.
Was that through Roy? Was that through Roy Shires? Or?
No, I don't remember who the president of the IWA was right now off the top of my head. But
Tony,
they put Dominic DeNucci over as their world champion. Yeah.
Tony, this is not to jump ahead, but he ends up with Rupert Murdoch with television. Rupert famously, Fox News #1 in news. They weren't even #4 when he put that out.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, several things happen and they become #1, at least as far as ratings, whatever you think about it, ratings.
Right.
You have Jim Barnett doing the same thing. I just think that Rupert learned a lot from Jim Barnett because they had a partnership down there. He comes down there and says, we have a world champion. That was why it's important to get up with the IWA. We have these round systems that's all around that we're going to get rid of because that's not what people do around the globe. It was all perception. You're flying the boys first class. I just feel like Rupert Murdoch learned a lot from
Jim. And you had to be a coat and tie too, Jim. John.
Yeah, that's right.
You had to be a coat and tie down.
Really?
The wrestlers had to dress first class also. They had traveling. They always had to be in coats and ties. Yeah. And you had to present yourself as a very upscale business person as a wrestler.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And did he bring in talent right away from America?
He did. He brought in Buddy Austin. He brought in Dick Steinborn, Hercules Cortez, Billy Red Cloud, Tarzan Tyler, Spirios Aaron. He brought in a lot of people, and then he used some local people too. I mean, he knew he was going to alienate Australians if he didn't work with Australians, right? So he put over Ron Peters and Hans Schroeder and Roy Hefferman, who was one half of the Fabulous Kangaroos.
Yeah,
he used him quite a bit. I mean, he was very.
And Al Calzado came down there later on too as a referee.
Yeah, he was very good. I mean, Jim, we talked about in the first episode, and we're going to continue to talk about it going forward. He knew talent. Right. And so he was very stringent about getting the best that he could get. So,
now, were there any issues with him getting TV when he first went down there, or did the TV come with the
that was all kind of front run by Jack Little, and he's the one that set up the relationship.
Exactly.
And Jim got in there, and Rupert Murdoch was actually more of a newspaper guy when Jim first got there, and then that's when Rupert a little bit later, closer to 1970, he started expanding. Some of that could have been getting the rub from Barnett on, growth and expansion and, the world is our oyster vision and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into Rupert a little bit more later on because there's another guy that's going to enter in here in just a little bit that was one of Rupert's mortal enemies that we're going to talk about. So it's going to be exciting. We'll get to this exciting battle of these television moguls here in a little bit.
So what happens next? When does Bill Dundee come into place? When does that guy named Jack Brisco come into place? What happens next?
So 1965, so we're talking about television. We should mention that 1965, the very first World Heavyweight Championship change takes place that was broadcast across Australia on Channel 9. Ray Stevens defeated Dominic DeNucci for the world title. And that was something that was exciting because they had never seen a title change on television for a world championship before.
And that's amazing that they would give that away for free, right? I mean,
right.
Even in today's business,
that would have been crazy in the United States. I mean, they didn't do that. They didn't even put championship tag team matches on national television.
Hey, Jerry, I was sitting by Dominic DeNucci at one of the Hall of Fames, and I didn't know him very well. Obviously, I know who he is, but I didn't know him personally very well. And he leans over to me at some point. He's like 90-something years old at the time. And he goes, that fucker won't ever show up. Shut up, will he? And he just had this stuff. I love this guy. I love
Dominic.
Yeah. The other thing, they do a couple of other things too to innovate the product that Australians have, and you know what works best is things that fans have never seen, because we talked about before, wrestling fans love new stuff, right? And so they start doing tournaments, and they've never had tournaments in Australia, and so they put Roy Hefferman over Carl Gotch in the
Oh,
finals of this tournament, which the fans never thought Carl Gotch would ever get beat, right? So that was a big deal, and that drew a sellout on October the 22nd of '65. And then
In what city, Tony?
let's see, do I have it? I think it was in Melbourne. I think it
Yeah.
was in Melbourne, where the television was originating, because they put it on TV, but it also sold out at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so this whole thing about talent and quality of matches and faster paces of matches and American style and new innovations like title changes on television and tournaments. They're going to bring in the Russian roulette battle royal. Nobody's ever seen that before. And then in '66, guess what? If you think these guys have put all the wood on this fire that they can put on it, guess what they do in '66? They bring
What?
in Bruno Sammartino.
wow.
Bruno Sammartino, who's the brand new, he's been the champion for 3 years. Everybody knows Madison Square Garden. Everybody knows about Bruno. He's a worldwide phenomenon. And they bring Bruno Sammartino in on April 15th of 1966 to face Waldo von Erich. And they have Bruno on the whole tour, and they pay him about 20 grand to come in. And I can't imagine how much money they made on that tour with Bruno on top for that tour around Australia.
How was Bruno such a big name down there? Was it magazines?
Magazines and newspapers, because New York City is the media capital,
And
of the
Bruno's on the
world.
cover of everything.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
did Bruno do down there? I know how he did as far as
Oh,
drawing.
they set it on fire. What do you mean other than
I mean,
drawing?
how did he get over? I mean, Bruno. I mean, Bruno got over everywhere. From what I know, Bruno got over everywhere he was. How
Yeah.
did Bruno get over in Australia?
He got over really pretty well, because
It's
I mean,
selling out, huh?
if you watch his, especially, I'm thinking to myself, the matches he had with Superstar Graham and some of those matches. I mean, those are not slow, methodical
Oh,
matches.
that match
You
he
know,
had in '74 with, I think '74 with Stan Hansen. Good God, man! Or '74 or '76. The one he had in
yeah.
Spiro Agnew. God,
And he
almighty.
and he and he's only been champ here for 3 years, because I can only imagine. And Waldo von Erich was a hell of a worker. I
Yeah.
imagine they put on some fantastic matches. I think he probably got over great, because they drew a lot of money with him on that tour.
Let me ask you about Waldo von Erich. Was Lance von Erich, was that his son?
No, I don't think Lance
So
was a
I was
von.
reading Wikipedia today, getting ready for the show, and Waldo. It sounded like he was some type of relation to Doris Atkinson, Fritz's wife.
It might be true. I don't know for sure.
I mean, obviously Fritz and Waldo weren't brothers or anything like that.
Well, Waldo's another one of those guys that, and probably because that Fritz was been so big, and because of the boys and everything, a lot of people have forgotten about Waldo. But I'll tell you what, now, when Bill Watts wanted a heel in Oklahoma, when he was in there with McGurk, that's who they brought in to, like you said, pop the territory, and he did.
Yeah.
So they're in about a 10-year stretch from the time Fritz and Waldo were a tag team up until the mid '70s. Waldo von Erich was a draw everywhere.
Now, when I went in Australia in the early '70s, there, Jim was just getting into the ethnic guys, or we had Sparrows there for Melbourne Greeks. We had Dominic there for all the Italian population. He had Samoans there. He had a little bit of every type. And when did he kind of pick that up from Vince Senior, or was that part of his game plan all along, or you didn't even know?
Oh, no, I don't know, but that makes logical sense to me, that
Yeah.
he would have picked that up from the East Coast guys, to do that, or maybe Johnny Doyle, because they did a lot of ethnic stuff in California. They put over the Spanish dudes, and that was probably
Tony,
some Johnny Doyle influence there.
he brought in Bruno instead of the NWA champion. Uh,
Uh-huh.
that seems a little bit targeted. Was that because of they didn't have the association with
They,
NWA?
they they didn't have the association, and they weren't sure exactly where they stood
So they bring
with a
over Bruno, who's probably a bigger star. I don't know who the NWA champion was in '66, but you bring over
Gene Kaniski.
Gene
Yeah.
Kaniski. How would Gene have drawn? Do you know?
Probably well. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, but
I don't know. I think he would have been. He might have been got over, but I think he was too much the old Wall Street star because Gene was one of those big, huge guy. I mean, Gene
he
was
was a
like,
lot more methodical, you
yeah,
know.
he was just a prodder. He was one of the, he wasn't a high spot guy at all, John.
But he was a pretty much of a superstar football player, and he was a superstar in Canada. So he was well known. I mean, anybody that had that title was well known.
Right. It just seemed like
But
an
I
interesting
don't.
choice, obviously for obvious reasons that he chose Bruno, which seems like a
I'm
great
kind of.
choice. He's on the cover of all the magazines. He's on the cover of every damn thing that comes out of the media capital of New York. Plus, Bruno is this charismatic guy who looks absolutely incredible. Legitimately one of the strongest men in the world.
My
I
take
mean, if
on it
you're.
is he wanted a relationship with Vince Senior, and so he was probably trying to build that relationship with Vince Senior, trying to get
Right.
that talent over. Because New York talent in the early '70s, it was the territory wasn't real strong in the early '70s. You know, they really weren't. But New York was always strong, the stronghold. So my perception of the deal that Jim and John was probably trying to get in with Vince Senior and wanted their talent. So.
I mean, it's always hard because looking forward, everything's so vague, but looking back, it's so clear. I mean, if you think about it, so you go in 64, you get going in 65, you got it really strong, you rolling like crazy. How can we keep this going? How can we put another log on this big fire? I mean, that was a perfect choice. I mean, it was a brilliant business decision. I would have picked Bruno over Gene, and I'm an NWA guy,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I would too.
I mean, but they did the exact right thing for their business at that particular time, for sure. Now they're gonna change their mind coming up, but back then, with what they had available, they did the right thing by bringing him in. They also had a lot of tag teams, and they were bringing in some of the best tag teams that were around back then. Sandy and George Scott, Bruno or Brute Bernard and Skull Murphy, which they were a big time tag team in the '60s.
Big time.
Larry Hennig and Harley Race were a big time tag team. Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel were out of this world as a tag team in the '60s and early '70s. So, I mean, their cards were just phenomenal, and they got their average crowd size up by the end of '66 to 9,000 people a week per
Wow.
show.
How many shows a week are they running?
And the promotions around there were drawing 2,500, 3,000 people. What was your question, John?
How many shows a week are they running?
They're running they're running four main towns. They're running Sydney, they're running Brisbane, they're running Melbourne, and then they're filling in with some other towns like Newcastle and Adelaide and Perth. They're doing those once a month.
And they're
And
averaging
once a month
9,000.
when I went there once a month we go to the West Coast too to Perth. I was the only town on the West Coast that we actually hit though.
Yeah, it might be the only town on the West Coast actually.
Yeah, at that time it probably was.
Yeah.
I
So
was
I
there
just
when Nathan Jones walked out. I watched him walk out.
In Perth.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
in Perth. That's his
what
hometown. He flew all the way down there and got down there, and whatever happened. He got his bag and walked out. Never
I
saw
mean,
him again.
what do you guys think? I mean, that seems like that's a pretty good payoff to come in for a
Yeah.
week or two for 20,000 in
Oh,
1966.
for that time there, if you put John probably can calculate it with today's money, but that's probably up there a lot of money calculated in today's dollar. It was
So in
back then; it was a huge amount back in those days.
so in '67 they start running the Russian roulette battle royals. They bring that gimmick in. They start doing that. That gets over like Rover. They're still drawing big time. Um, and they're using tournaments. They're using tournaments and battle royals to headline their cards and get guys over. Pretty much, if they want to get a new guy over that fans haven't seen before, but they've seen them in magazines or whatever, they have them come in and win the tournament. They have them come in and win the battle royal, and then they stay for the rest of the tour and put them over. Which is a pretty smart strategy, back then for sure, because fans had never seen that before. Pat O'Connor shows up in '67. Um, Red Bastine and Mario Milano are the tag team champions for the rest of '67. And again, like we said, not only are they flying everywhere, guys, but they're flying in the 727 jet airliner, which was brand new in 1967. It was the brand new state of the art airplane to fly on. So I would say Barnett probably.
And plus, Tony, when we got there, I mean, we went to like the President Hotel in Melbourne. I mean, we didn't. Jim had us in the facility. We were in first class five-star hotels back in those days. So Jim kept that perception going, whether it's in the air or in town, because he wanted his guys. Didn't want them to know, days in type hotel. He put us in the five-star hotels.
And I tried to look up every guy I could think of that ever was there, and almost every one of them said they loved it. Like they loved going to Australia. It like you hear mixed reviews from people that go to Japan and go on a tour. Some people really they take to it, and some of them don't like it at all. I saw Wendy Richter be on y'all show, and she's like, I didn't like Japan. I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Jack hated it. Jack hated it too.
I don't know why you'd like Australia. You got beautiful women down there, great people, and you're making a
great beer. Great beer, John. Don't forget the beer. They had great beer now, just like Japan. They had great beer in Australia. But I'll tell you, I did just a little anecdote here to the side. I can tell you who broke Jim Barnett's dress code and while I was there. So I can tell you that. Tarzan Tyler. Yeah, Sydney's hot. Sydney's a hot climate, so it's hotter than hell. So one day Tarzan Tyler shows up in a pair of Bermuda shorts and a T-shirt on. Oh, Jimsy comes, Joe, Tarzan, I'm going to have to find you. I'm going to have to find you. And Tarzan looked at Jim, if you find me, and they were using Tarzan pretty good on top. Tarzan said, Jim, I just started a program with Mario Milano. If you find me, I'm going to walk today. I'm not going to do TV. Well, for you, we'll make an exception. So when he made that exception for Tarzan, everybody else got upset, and said, okay, all right. So that's how okay, you wear shorts and T-shirts as long as you wear shoes. That was the old trade-off. We couldn't wear the flip-flops like Tarzan liked to wear. But Tarzan Tyler's the one that broke the dress code rule and got it changed in Australia.
Yeah,
so after that, we're all a bunch of bums. We're all a bunch of street bums.
So, John, you asked about Bill Dundee. He was an opening match guy. He started out.
He was the opening match when I was there.
Yeah, he started out there in '67, and he was the opening match guy, and he's pretty much the opening match guy the whole time in Australia. And we'll talk about what causes Bill Dundee to come to the States where he really gets over. I was just going to say the one guy, almost everybody I found with a quote about Australia, they just bragged on it. I mean, they just loved it. And Killer Kowalski said he dang near stayed there. Like he said he was there for 3 years before he came home, and he almost didn't come home. Like he almost
died there. Almost died there. When I was married to him in the ring there, I'd have to work with him every night, and he could. Jim, we didn't have a lot of guys on the card, so the matches were extra long, and a lot, especially when we go outside, in the heat and humidity there, it was brutal. And we thought Walter was going to die several times. He had just changed over his diet. He just transformed from regular eating into becoming a full-fledged vegetarian at the time, and that really had an effect on his health.
So they're running Adelaide on Wednesday, Brisbane on Thursday, Sydney on Friday, Melbourne on television, house show on Saturday, and once a month in Perth. And they're filling it in with spot show towns. And the tours usually last about 3 months. And they're just here at the end of '67, man. They're killing it. And
was talent just staying for one tour?
Everybody except some of these guys we're talking about. I mean, Killer Kowalski stayed 3 years. I mean, but a lot of guys.
I'd say 9. I'd say 9 months. I went 3 tours. I'd say 9 months.
But I can only guess that Killer was not with a particular booking office then, because people back in the States would be like, "Get your butt back here! I got you."
But Killer was doing part of the booking back in his recently programmed it in for that a long time too.
Yeah, I would think
Helmut Lewin was doing co-booking back in those days.
I would think if you work for Mushnick, or if you work for Morris Siegel, or whoever, they'd be saying, go to Australia, but get on back here because I got things for you to do. So most guys probably only stayed for a tour.
So was it '68 when you got some guy named Jack Brisco that ends up in Australia?
Yep. So they're really excited because this former NCAA national champion is coming in. He's been a pro, what, Jerry, about 2 years there at
2 years,
point?
yeah.
In the first trip to Australia. And,
Mm.
I don't think it happened on this trip, but in some trip to Australia was where he and Billy Robinson had their hotel wrestling match. Right?
That was the second trip, not on the first one. No,
Yeah,
second trip.
they missed that. They missed the plane right to the
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
town, and they had to go tell Mr. Barnett everything that happened because they were
Yeah,
all
the only
they're all
reason Jim
skinned
didn't
up.
fire him because Jack had the title at the time, so he couldn't fire him. He
They
was getting
they
four
were
title matches.
they were all skinned up and scarred up, and it wasn't from the match. It was from the
Yeah,
hotel match that they
yeah,
had.
the
They
little
scooted the
carpet in the
chairs back.
hotel.
They moved the furniture back. So
Yeah,
we'll put a pause right here because there's some things that are going on at this same time in Georgia that are going to come into play here a little bit. So let's talk about Georgia and two or three guys that are real integral to this story that breaks out in '64. And one of those guys is Ray Gunkel. And Ray was a two-time AAU national champion in 47, 48. He played football and wrestled at Purdue. He was undefeated in wrestling in his junior and senior years. He was an All-American and helped his team win the Big Ten Conference twice. And he finished second in the NCAA finals to a guy who would be the successor to Lou Thez.
from Minnesota.
Yep, Dick Hutton. So
From Oklahoma State. I'm sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, Dick. Yeah, he's one of your guys.
And
right?
Dick Hutton actually was from Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did.
God bless Texas. God bless
Yeah,
Texas.
I put you over, John. I put you over there.
Yep. But Ray was a pretty hefty guy. I mean, this is the kind of to give you an idea of what's going to happen later. But he's 6'3", he weighs 260, and that's when he's in phenomenal shape, right? And so he debuted in Indianapolis. So very familiar with Kohler and Barnett and all these people, right? And he went to Texas. He's booked out of Morris Siegel's office and also Ed McLemore's office. He's booked by Doc Sarpolis. He wins the Texas heavyweight title twice. And then he wins it 3 times overall from 51 to 53. And he wins the Texas tag team title 6 different times with 6 different partners in Texas. And then in 57, he moves to Georgia. And there he teams up with the guy that already owns the Atlanta office, Don McIntyre, who also owns Louisiana, by the way. And they win the tag team titles there. And Gunkel would hold that international tag title 7 times. And then Buddy Fuller comes sort of into the picture here because Buddy's friends with Don McIntyre. And they have this meeting out on Don McIntyre's boat at Lake Lanier in Atlanta. And McIntyre tells Fuller, man, we're getting over like crazy. We're drawing lots of fans. We're making lots of money. But I got this real estate stuff that I'm doing. And Fuller looks around and he sees this great, awesome boat. And he knows he's making a lot of money in Atlanta and all. And he's like, yeah, he goes, I don't know. I can't get along with Ray. He's grumpy. He's grouchy. You want to control everything. And I'm just tired of dealing with it. Why don't you buy me out? So Don McIntyre sells his partnership to Buddy Fuller. Buddy had been successful in Memphis. When Roy bought Memphis from Avey and Munchnick in 56, it just kind of struggled along there from 56 to 59. And then he put Buddy in charge there. Buddy wanted to get into the business. He wanted to be a wrestling promoter. So Roy goes, okay, well, just got this town here. So why don't you go in there, boy? We'll put you in there and we can see what you can do. Well, he pops it. And the way he pops it is he brings these 4 or 5 guys in there that he would continue to do. He kind of had the Barnett and Doyle thing. He got a plan and a pattern going, right. And his biggest thing that he did was Mario Galento. So he brings Mario Galento into Memphis. They sell out, the Ellis Auditorium. They mix in. I don't have it right here in front of me, but the old shooter there from Memphis, they mix him in. They had the big match at the baseball stadium with Mario Galento. What was his name, Jerry and John? Remember? I'm drawing a blank.
The old shooter. I can't.
Not
Yeah,
Sputnik. Sputnik wasn't a shooter.
No, 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 not Sputnik, but Sputnik had the match with the shooter that, and there's guys out there
Oh
yelling
yeah, I
at the
know the
screen
match.
right now.
I can't think who it was. Yeah.
But anyway, they draw big. So Buddy was just one of those guys where once he got successful, he got bored, and he wanted to go do it same thing over again, right? So he goes out to Phoenix and he buys a farm down at Loxley, Alabama, and he goes out to Phoenix and he buys Phoenix from Ray Fenton for a couple of years, from 61, 62, 63. He goes and McIntyre sells him Mobile. And so he goes in there and he takes these
Well,
same
let's
guys.
wake up. Phoenix was probably his only failure that he ever had in the promotional business, right?
Yeah, yeah. It didn't, hardly anybody could make it go. It
Yeah.
just never was.
Nobody did make it go.
It never was run right, but it didn't pop for him. So this deal with McIntyre looks pretty good, right? So he sells out over there in Alabama to his cousin, I guess it would be Lee Fields, Roy's nephew. He sells out to him and comes to Georgia and becomes partners with Ray Gunkel. Now the way this set this partnership up was kind of interesting. They set it up where Gunkel owned 45%, Fuller owned 45%, and Paul Jones, who was their guy out front who got the promoter's license from the athletic commission, he gets 10%. He had been the old time promoter from years past, and his percentage had gone down over the years, and he had 10%. Now, any businessman that would look at this and go, you're entering into a partnership where one guy's got 45, one guy's got 45, and one person has 10. Who has the say, right? There's nobody with a majority ownership, so they don't get along from the get go. Even though they're making lots of money. Fuller brings Galento in. They draw 38. It just was 60 years ago yesterday. They draw 38,000 people to Ponce de Leon Park in Atlanta, where Fuller beat Galento for the Georgia title, and that program draws tons of money. And then they follow it up with the Torres brothers and the Anderson brothers, and they're on a roll from there. Atlanta just draws really, really well from that point on. By the way, their special referee for that match in Atlanta at the ballpark was Rocky Marciano.
The boxer, the famous boxer, yeah.
Big time match there. I wish we had more pictures of it, but we don't. Well, there's another character here. The other character that's kind of in the background that's going to enter into this whole thing is a guy by the name of Ted Turner. Mm-hmm. Ted Turner, he attended Brown University, and so did the lady that Ray Gunkel is going to marry, named Ann Campbell, went to Brown University as well. And there's rumors that they were with each other while they were in college. Ted Turner got suspended from Brown for having women in his dorm room. So I would imagine that might be true.
No wonder he ended up in the wrestling business.
God bless him.
There's a book in my library called Citizen Turner, and I was just kind of thumbing through it again the other night, and there was a quote in there from one of Ted's fraternity brothers, and he said, Ted had every girl around 5 states around Brown University except one, and if he'd have had more time, he'd have got her too. So
wow.
Yeah, so Ted was a ladies' man, let's just say, and almost every wrestler that was in the WTBS studio where Ted was around hardly ever saw him by himself. We'll put it that way. So he liked girls. But he
Tony, to back that story up, we did TV there at 7 a.m. in the morning. And so we're getting there at 6:30. A lot of time, my brother and I would pull up and we'd be dressed in the hallway. Turner would be coming out of his office. Hey, Brisco, because we're college guys too, and he kind of took it like, he said, you just use my office in there to change there. That's right, that's the type of guy he was. He just opened up his office and we go over there and change and shower and everything.
It's kind of interesting, he got kicked out there, and his dad was a wealthy dude. He'd started a billboard company called Turner Outdoor Advertising, and so Ted came from some money. his dad was a interesting cat, and he was constantly criticizing Ted about everything, which probably led to a lot of his rebellious attitude. Uh, Ted was Ted was majoring in Greek philosophy at Brown because he wanted to be on the debate team and he wanted to be a thinker, and so his father writes him this letter that says, "Hey, I heard you're going to be a major in Greek philosophy. I'm trying to figure out what successful businessman I know that has done that before. And I can't think of any. So I don't know what the heck you're doing over there." I mean, he's just really, not for anything that Ted's doing. And anyway, his dad might have had some mental issues because he commits suicide.
Right.
Ted's just 24 years old in 1963. And all of a sudden, Ted's in charge of this multi-million-dollar outdoor advertising company that's cash generating about $1 million a year. So it's throwing off about $1 million a year in cash. And Ted thinks, what I need to do with this money is I need to invest in television. So around 1970, that's what he does. He buys this little UHF station outside Atlanta that he would assign call letters from the FCC to, called WTCG, Turner Communications Group. And so he gets that little station going, and he gets out and hustles and tries to, get advertisers, and just like any startup or fledgling business where you have to nurse it along till it finally comes around. But what's interesting is Brown finally gave him a degree. So he went back there to give a speech to the National Association of College Broadcasters, and they gave him an honorary BA for having attended the university. So
how many years later was that? Several years.
It was 1989 from 1962. So
Wow.
30.
But they threw his ass out, right?
They threw him out. But 30 years later, they welcomed him back.
Of course they did. Once he's filthy rich.
Yep. So at that time, television was on live. They did the wrestling shows live in Columbus in the afternoons on Saturday, and they did them Saturday night at 6 o'clock live. So the original Saturday night show on the Atlanta station WQXI was at 6 o'clock, and it was called Live Atlanta Wrestling. So they later years they went in to tape the show in Atlanta, but in those years they went to Columbus. They went to Atlanta first. They taped the show, then they went to Columbus to do the live show, and then they went and did a house show. But in the early years, they did Columbus first at live in the afternoon, and then drove back to Atlanta and did the live show. So just a little bit something that was different then than would be later.
And how does Turner fit into all? Where does Turner come into play with this?
Yeah, so where it comes in is somehow or another, Ted and Buddy Fuller become friends, and if Ted is pitching for, he's got to have something on this little station he just bought that's gonna, and people in Atlanta love wrestling because they're buying all these tickets to these ballparks and they're drawing 38,000 people. And Ted's going, I need sports, I need entertainment, I need something to get my station some programming so people will know that my station's over here. I need to get wrestling. So he approaches them, and he gravitates a little bit more to Buddy, probably because Ray is married to this girl he used to, have a relationship with in college. So he's probably thinking, I'll probably have better luck going to Buddy, especially if Ann has told him anything, that's happened. So, he talking to Buddy, and he tells Buddy, look, here's the thing. And this is what's unique about all of these stories is these guys that can see the future, and they can see what's coming down the road, and they can see around the corner, right? Instead of just looking in a straight line. And he tells Buddy, he says, listen, the future is satellite. Like, we're launching all these satellites and all these rocket ships from NASA, and that's how television is going to be broadcast in the future. Right now, they're broadcasting it over these network telecommunications wires all across the country. That's all going to be done away with. We're going to get our television signals from outer space. And Buddy Fuller sitting there going, "That's insane! Like that blows my mind." Like, and the more Ted talks about it, and the more he casts a vision, and the more he puts clarity on it, Fuller's going, "Yeah, yeah, I see that. Yeah,
Tony,
wow,
let me jump in right here. It's just so fascinating hearing this story because I hadn't heard that side of the story. But when I first got here in Florida, and satellite was just Eddie Graham had an interview in the paper probably and before satellite, before cable TV, saying that exact thing. So I'm sure Buddy came down here and told Eddie Graham that same thing that cable was going to be the destruction of the wrestling business, not the promoter, but cable
right,
TV.
yeah, right,
So,
right."
so
So,
that all ties into exactly what you're saying.
yeah, I think Buddy, who's looking at it through the wrestling lens,
Yeah.
he's looking down the
Promoter list.
yeah, yeah, he's looking down this telescope at this future that Ted Turner's talking about, and he's like, "Holy cow!" He gets the same vision that Mushnick and Barnett and Doyle got with syndicated, right? Like, wow, we're going to be able to put the signal all over the United States at the same time. We're not even going to have to send the tape around. It's just going to like come in, like turning on your water faucet. Like, wow, that's fantastic. So he goes back and tries to tell the story to Ray. And Ray is like, that's science fiction. This dude, I've heard about this dude. You know, he
So
got
has his
kicked
wife.
out. Yeah, he I've heard about this guy did this. I mean, here's a Purdue graduate, right? And a guy who graduated from Purdue and did well in school and did well. He's like, this guy got kicked out of college. This guy is a phony. He's a phone. He don't know what he's talking about. That sounds crazy. Turning on television like water out of a faucet. That ain't gonna ever happen. We're on the biggest ABC television station in Atlanta. And you want us to move over there on that thing with this crazy
On a
guy?
U channel.
This carpetbagger sales guy that's going around, he's going around town begging everybody to advertise on his station. Like that billboard salesman, you want to believe that dude? You can just hear it, right?
Yeah.
And so Buddy's like, okay, yeah, this, and so they keep talking about it, and Buddy keeps wanting to go with Ted, and Ray keeps saying like, "You're crazy! Like, why do you want to mess with the best thing since sliced bread? Like, we are rolling. Like, don't mess with it. You're going to screw it all up." So it gets to the point where, and I can't verify this, right? So I got Butcher Vachon's book, and I was hoping that there would be a story in there about this because there's a story that Ray and the Vachons did come in to Georgia in the late '60s, and they were a big heel tag team in Georgia, and they were against Buddy Fuller and Ray Gunkel, who were the big babyface tag team, and so they did do some singles matches, but I'm having trouble tracking down this exact match that's always been talked about, where Buddy comes in one night and Butcher Vachon and Ray Gunkel are in the dressing room talking. And when he walks in, you know how it's like when you walk in a room and you know people have been talking about you, right? So they walk in, immediately the conversation changes or they stop talking. He's like, "Hey, guys, what's going on?" "Oh, nothing, just regular night, you know." "Well, me and Butcher tonight in the main event, what we going to do? What we going to do tonight?" "Well, yeah, I don't, they're hum-hauling around this, that, and the other." He goes, "Hey, well, why don't you go, get a hot dog or something, and we'll come back a little bit later and we'll have this figured out, So he goes away, comes back in a little while. "Well, what are we doing tonight?" "Well, Butcher just tell you when you get in the ring." And Buddy goes, "We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like, what are we doing tonight?" And then Ray looks at Buddy and says, "We'll grab your best hole," which you know what that means, right? We're you and Butcher going to shoot, So they get in the ring, and the referee's checking them over, and Ray looks at Butcher and he goes, "Listen, this is my livelihood. This is my business. I've sold everything in my life to be here. We're doing good. We're doing a good business, this, that, and the other. And if you're thinking that you're going to hurt me tonight, I just want you to know you're about to tangle with a wildcat. Like I'm gonna fight you with everything I got." And Butcher looks at him and he goes, "We're not doing that. We're just gonna work a match. Like, you're gonna beat me. Just beat me." And so they do about a 10-minute match, and Buddy goes over. But it's always been kind of said that's how intense their relationship was. Like that Ray would get to the point that he would get so obsessed with uh, getting rid of Buddy that he would do something like this. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story.
Sounds like it. So, right.
You could believe it. We'll put it that
Yeah.
way. But I
Knowing the characters, yes.
yes, but for any hardcore historians that are watching, I have no verification of it, but it's a great story, and so I thought we should include it here because it does indicate that their relationship is not good.
And Tony, how does this tie into what with Jim Barnett?
So um the I was going to say too. I'll save this for when Jerry gets back. But
I can hear you.
okay. Well, it was just I put this in the notes, but it's just interesting to me that you can see that the power structure at this time in the late '60s is changing because the NWA title and it changing toward Eddie Graham. Right, he's becoming more and more powerful. He's gotten the Florida, and I know we're not talking about this is not the Eddie show, but he gets more and more power from Cowboy Luttrell, slowly but surely buys him out, and he's partners with Lester Welch, which is Buddy Fuller's uncle. He's Roy Welch's youngest brother, and they're partners down there. And you can kind of tell the power in the NWA is going Buddy's way because the title change in '69 happens in Florida. Gene Kaniski drops the title to Dory Funk, which is an amazing thing because title changes always took place in St. Louis and Toronto. They never took place anywhere else. But it all of a sudden, excuse me, all of a sudden it takes place in Florida, which tells you you got to be pretty powerful to get a title change match, right? And so Buddy and Lester and Eddie are all going to be involved in this whole Georgia thing, right? So Buddy goes to Eddie and says, "Listen, I can't get along with Ray." And Buddy goes, "Well, just hang in there, just stay in there, and it'll be okay. You can do it." So he goes ahead and stays a little while. So we'll put a pause on that for a second and go back to Australia because at this same time, Johnny Doyle passes away. And so Johnny Doyle is sick with cancer for about a year from 68 to 69. They actually shut the promotion in Australia. This is their first stumbling block in Australia. This is the first thing that's happened to them where they haven't come up snake eyes on everything, right? And they actually shut the promotion down for 3 or 4 months while Johnny Doyle is sick. And so now it's going to be an interesting situation for Mr. Barnett because his alter ego, other side strength guy partner is now gone. And he's going to be on his own. And he's going to be by himself for the first time since he worked for Fred Kohler. And he wasn't on his own then because he had Fred Kohler. This is going to be the first time Jim Barnett is in a solo situation, right? Owning Australia.
Right.
And so his first, and I think it's interesting because his first move right after Johnny Doyle's funeral is to contact Sam Muchnick and want to get back in the National Wrestling Alliance, in which Sam does that for him. Sam welcomes him back, which now gives him access to the NWA world title. And
now,
so
Sam's thinking was, NWA needs to expand worldwide, right?
NWA needs more worldwide influence. We need the title to travel to more places. It'll put more prestige on the title going to Australia. And I also think, just this is my speculation, but I think Sam is totally worn out with being the president. Like I think the booking the champion and being president and listening to the gripes of all these promoters and everything, he was done with it in 55. This is now 69. Right. So here's this Barnett guy that's a smart businessman. He's a really great administrator. He handles business really well. Maybe I could get him to book the champion and then I won't have to deal with that so much. So I think that was maybe another motivation for Sam of welcoming Jim back is I think he thought Jim was on the ball and could help out with the alliance quite a bit.
And for Jim, was it a safety blanket issue?
Yeah. Yeah.
His partner died, his business partner died, the guy that does all the booking. All of a sudden, he just kind of says, "Okay, I'm I'm gonna log on with the NWA. It's kind of a
if you think about it, every promoter did that. The reason they were a member of the NWA was safety. I mean, they all reached out to be a part of this power group that they thought, well, if we can cooperate and we can get along, that will provide safety for me. And I think that's what Jim thought too. And
And
I
Jim
think
was
Jim,
probably looking on it on the talent basis too, getting the talent from the NWA and getting back on that course because there wasn't a lot of
yeah,
other places he could go for talent
yeah,
except for
by 6 years he had booked a lot of people in 6 years, right? So it was going to be a whole new batch of people he could get. He went in 1961 when he was in Indianapolis. Jim applied for membership, and I got that membership application from Tim Hornbaker from the NWA files, and um, so he'd wanted to be in the NWA since the time that he left to Fred Kohler, and partnered up with Barnett. He wanted back in, so he just saw this as a time where he probably thought, they'll have a little sympathy for me. My partner just died. I haven't been in the United States making anybody mad. I've been gone for a while, and
and I hadn't been to Kentucky in a while.
I haven't been encroaching on anybody in any particular area, so everybody's probably going to be okay with me. So he gets in. They take him back.
And does that change anything in Australia for him significantly?
Yeah, he gets Dory Funk Jr. He gets Dory Funk coming in defending the world heavyweight title, which on every cover of every magazine, everybody's seen Dory Funk. Everybody's seen the NWA champion. So now Dory's coming in with shine like Bruno did in '66. Like, this is a big deal that the NWA champion's going to be here, and we got to buy a ticket and go to this.
Now, do you have any records of the houses that they were drawn in and who Dory's opponents was down there at the time?
No, but I do see that their houses didn't take a big dip. The big thing that caused them to take a big dip was when their stadium in Sydney got condemned.
Sydney, yeah.
Yeah, so their stadium in Sydney got condemned, and so Sydney got off somewhat because
I was there when they closed that down.
They couldn't figure out where to run. I mean, they went to different places. There were city regulations.
We went to Newcastle at the tennis facility there.
Yeah, that's where you end up, right at the end, right after you've been to the different places. You went to finally they went to the Capitol Theater, and that worked for a little while, and then the neighbors all started complaining. There's all these wrestling fans coming, making all this noise and raising hell, and we're not going to put up with this anymore. So they didn't get to stay there, so they went to Newcastle. That's where they ended up. Mm-hmm. So I think this probably, and this is just me kind of reading into the tea leaves about looking at the information and, kind of getting a sense of how Jim Barnett operates and how he's thinking. I think this might be the first time he started thinking about selling because his partner died. He's back in the NWA. He's the farthest away from the power of the NWA, even though he's not near St. Louis. He's not near the power center.
Now, Tony, is this the time too that Lonnie got sick and went back to the States too?
Yeah, that happened too.
And Jim Barnett is a kind of a glad-handing power magnet, correct?
Right.
So for him to be away from the power source, that to him, for a person that loves to be inside and all the internal stuff, that's a big deal.
And I think it's the same thing that kind of happened to him when he was in the States. Him and Doyle both. He conquered it. Like, it's been conquered. I know everybody, and I'm in relationship with everybody there is here. There's nobody new to meet. I've done it all in Australia, so I gotta get back to a closer power source, and I gotta have a whole new project. I gotta have a whole new vision, and that's how these kinds of guys are. It's like the worst.
Completely agree. I mean, I know exactly what they're thinking. You sit there and you've done it, and all of a sudden now all you can do is redo it.
Yeah,
that doesn't appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It appeals to some.
Now, Tony, in your real life, you deal with a lot of power people through CEO training and stuff like that. You see that quality in Jim, what you see in these CEOs in modern days?
100%. My biggest advice to a CEO is being a CEO is what you do. It's not who you are. And unfortunately, for a lot of guys, it becomes who they are. So when they lose that, they lose their whole identity. They lose everything, and they go into depression. And I mean, I've had guys that have been fired by their boards, and they didn't recover for it for 3 years. Trying to trying to get that identity back that they had before. I'm like, hey, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be that. You can be something else. Like, what would you rather do? I don't want to do anything. I want to be back doing what I was doing. I want to be back in the seat I was sitting in. And that's just part
Most
of
of these guys' egos. I mean, Jim had a tremendous ego, even though he kept it suppressed around you. You always knew that he knew what was going on. It's just because of
yeah.
his
And I say this all the time too, and I'll make this perfectly clear. You cannot succeed at that level without one. Like the pressures of the thing that you're trying to do and to sit in that seat that you're sitting in, if you don't have an ego, you'll get murdered. You'll get killed. Now, the question comes in is being healthy. How healthy is your ego? Because if you have an unhealthy ego, that can do you in. But if you have a healthy ego, you can survive these things and be strong because you got to be that. The higher you want to go, there's more price to be paid, right? And so, in order to pay that price, you have to believe enough in yourself to be able to do that. And you can't do that without an ego. I don't care what anybody says. It's just a matter of staying healthy in your thinking. And Barnett, I mean, I guess it depends on your opinion with all this information we're putting out there. But I mean, he typically went about things in a fairly healthy way where business was concerned. He knew what he wanted. He went out after it, and then, like we said before, he didn't mind investing. He didn't mind paying the price to get what he wanted, and he wasn't looking for a discount. If he was going to get the best, he was willing to pay for it. So I think this might be when he first starts thinking about it. He first starts thinking about selling. And the thing that's happening is there's a perfect opportunity that's opening up for him in the United States because there's these guys in Atlanta that can't get along. And what happens next is that Ray Gunkel finally gives in Atlanta, and he tells Buddy, he goes, okay, the station we're on, even though it's an ABC affiliate, even though it's a big station in Atlanta, they keep moving our show around. One night, we do it this time. Then they tell us we got to come back and do it at another time. Then they kind of come back, and the fans are all complaining. They don't know when our wrestling show's on. So we got to do something. I guess we'll move it over there and take a chance with your boy, So they moved the show. Bobby Simmons told me that he was one of the ring crew guys that moved the ring in the middle of the night. They didn't even tell the station they were leaving. Wow. They moved it from QXI over to Ted Turner's station in the middle of the night before the next TV show. And all of a sudden the ring was over there and there was no ring over at the WQXI. And they're like, hey, where'd the wrestling people go? And they're like, yeah, we're not going to be here anymore. See you later. Wow. And so they changed over. They changed over to Turner's station. Ray at this point. So when he's in really good shape, he's 6'3", 260. I don't know what he was, but I know he weighed a lot more than 260. And the night he went to Savannah to wrestle, he went to this Southern boarding house that all the boys knew about that had Southern style cooking, just like at your mama's house, where bring out the bowls, pass the bowls around, eat all you want. We'll keep filling the bowls. That's what he did. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy. And you guys would know. I've always heard, I don't know. I mean, but don't you have some kind of rule not to eat a certain amount of time before you go wrestle?
You got a common sense rule. There's no set in stone rule. No, but because.
But guys, if they had a show that night, they try to eat in the early afternoon or something.
Yeah, you
right?
try to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he eats on the way there. Before the match.
That was a common practice back then because everybody knew those smorgasbord places that you could put out of business that 5 wrestlers go into. They close them down after that.
Yeah. So he goes to this place and he eats all he can, and then he goes to this match with Ox Baker, and Ox hits him with the heart punch. He goes down. That doesn't kill him. He gets back to the locker room. He's sitting there.
Okay,
talking,
boom.
laughing.
That doesn't kill him. That doesn't kill him because Ox had the reputation of killing 2 guys with the heart punch.
Right. Yeah, one I know of for sure. And so he gets back to the locker room. He's talking, laughing around, and then boom, he has a heart attack, falls over and dies. In the locker room.
In the locker room. Wow.
Yeah, Alberto Torres was the one in Omaha that Ox hit that and he had a heart attack and died. But I don't think that was Ox either, was it, Jerry? That
No,
did
I
that?
don't think so either. No.
Yeah,
No.
Ox didn't kill anybody, but it sure blew up his legend,
Yeah, it sure
quite a bit.
did.
Could he
That he
try
did.
that heart punch on Tony Chimmel just to see if it works?
Well, if we could get Ox out of the grave, I'm sure he'd be happy to, especially after he shook hands with Chibnall. He'd be happy.
That's right. That's right.
So Ray Gunkel's dead. So now, they Ann Gunkel, who's not been involved in the wrestling business. She is a hotel executive there in Atlanta. She specializes in marketing. She's very successful and very smart, and quite good looking, by the way. And
Yeah, very, very, very good looking.
she comes
She's
in
a beauty queen, by the way, too, right? She won Miss several
yeah, I think she worked in Las Vegas too.
Yeah.
But she comes in going, okay, I'm here to be a part of the business now, and so Jody Hamilton said in his book that Tom Renesto called him and said he was at the office and he goes, well, the vultures are starting to descend on the carcass. He's like Buddy Fuller, Eddie Graham, Lester Welch, and Paul Jones are all in the office, and they're all trying to figure out how to kill the current company and start a new one that doesn't have Ann involved in it. So they shut down ABC Booking, which was the partnership between Ray Gunkel and Buddy Fuller, and they started a new company called Mid-South Sports Incorporated, and Ann doesn't have shares. Imagine that. And so Ann comes in one day, tries to come to the office, can't get in. Key doesn't work. Office is locked. She goes, gets a locksmith, has the door taken off, has a new door put on with a new lock on it, goes in, and Roy Lee Welch is kind of running the office at that time, which is Lester's son, and he comes in and there's a new door, and he goes, "Hey, we get a new door?" And she goes, "Yeah, I had a new door put in because my key wouldn't work." He calls Lester, "Hey, Daddy," Ann took the door off, and now she's got the key and we don't. And Lester goes, "Well, take that damn door off and put another one on." So they take that door off and call the locksmith and put another lock on, and this goes on,
And locksmiths loving this gig.
Yeah, it's a honey hole, right? These people changing doors every day. So then Lester, he freaks out. Lester is the softer, more emotional guy. I mean, Roy was a tough dude, man, and so was Herb. They were two tough guys. But Lester, he was a little more easygoing and a little bit more softer kind of guy. And this is all like he doesn't like dealing with this. Like if Buddy didn't like dealing with her, Lester really doesn't like dealing with her. And I should have mentioned too, I think I skipped over it, but Buddy and Lester traded out their shares. So Buddy traded out his shares in Atlanta for Lester Welch's shares in Florida, and they swapped. They swapped farms, they swapped houses, they swapped everything but furniture and clothes. And so Lester's now there dealing with Ann, and he can't deal with it. He's like, I remember Roy Lee Welch telling the story, like he's out in the parking lot, like almost having a seizure. His face is all red, and he can't get his breath. And he's like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to deal with this. So Eddie, I believe it was Eddie or Buddy that first contacted Jim about coming and buying Lester out from Atlanta.
I believe it was Eddie.
I kind of think it was too, Jerry. Although Buddy Fuller shows up at Jerry Jarrett's house in Nashville, and Buddy says, "Listen, Jim Barnett has offered to sell me Australia, and I love horses and I love farms, and I am really tempted to go there and do it, but my wife won't have anything of it. She ain't gonna live in Australia." She's going to live in Tennessee. She's going to live in Alabama. She'll live in Florida, but she ain't going to live in Australia. So I can't do it. So the first person I thought of was you. So Jim wanted to know if you'd be interested in buying Australia. So Jerry Jarrett gets to thinking about this, and he's thinking, I like farms. I like horses. I like all that. I could have a big farm in Australia. Which Jerry, if you know anything about him, he always had big farms. He always had lots of horses. He always had lots of cows, and he always got bigger ones every time. But he's thinking, man, I could have a super-sized farm in Australia. I could have a lot of horses and a lot of cows. And he goes and talks to his wife, Deborah, about it. And she goes, well, we got this kid coming. Jennifer, his daughter, is coming, and I want her born in the United States. So I'll have to come later. If you do this, I'll follow you, but I am not following you now. I'm going to have my daughter's going to be born here in the United States. And Jerry says, well, okay, just forget it. We're not going to do it. So he tells Buddy, I'll pass. My wife doesn't want to do it either. So tell Jim, I'm sorry, but I appreciate the offer, but no dice. So Jim tells Buddy Fuller, he goes, well, ask Jerry if he'd be interested in talking to me about other options. And Buddy goes, well, what do you mean? Jim goes, well, I'll talk to him about it when I get there. I'll come to Nashville, ask him if it'd be all right if I come to his house. I'll come to Nashville, talk to him about it. You can come too, Buddy, and we'll talk about the options. So Jim comes there. So meanwhile, in Georgia, Bill Watts is the booker, and is booking things down there. And the original plan was for Bill to stop off in Atlanta and book Atlanta and get Atlanta straightened out in this war, because Ann Gunkel goes and starts her own wrestling promotion. She goes and starts All South Wrestling and starts competing, right? She gets over this locked door business and decides, if they won't let me in the office and they're not going to give me ownership points, I guess I'll just start my own. So she's got Gunkel Enterprises already from the hotel business, and she puts All South Wrestling in as Gunkel Enterprises, and she starts her own wrestling company. And she hires Tom Renesto, who's the booker for the Georgia office. And she figures, as a smart business person does, if I get him, I'll get the boys then. And that's exactly what happens. So Renesto meets with all the boys in the Georgia office in November and says, hey, Ann Gunkel's starting up a new company. If you want to come over there with me, come on. And every wrestler leaves the regular NWA office. Every wrestler leaves except two people, Daryl Cochran and Bob Armstrong, and that's because they missed the meeting.
And they missed the meeting.
They weren't at the meeting, and they had Columbus that night. And because they missed the meeting, they show up in Columbus. And they show up in Columbus and nobody's there. Wow. And they're like, hey, how come there's no wrestlers? And Fred Ward goes, well, I think they all walked out today. And they're like, really? What happened? They're like, well, I guess there was a meeting. And they're like, what meeting?
Yeah.
So the two of them work a match in Columbus, and Fred pays them for working and then gives the money back to the crowd and says, well, that's all the show we're going to have. And thanks for coming. And here's all your money back. And all the boys leave. So Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving 1972, Mid-South Sports has no wrestlers except Bob Armstrong and Daryl Cochran.
Wow.
So
the biggest night of the year.
So for 73, Eddie calls Bill Watts and says, hey, I know you're kind of tired of dealing with Leroy. Why don't you come on down to Georgia, fix this situation? We got no wrestlers except two. You come in here, you fix this situation. When you get this fixed, I want you to come to Florida and work with me. So he's there in 73. Barnett comes in 73 and says, hey, Bill Watts is going to be leaving. He's going to be going to Florida. Jerry, I want to offer you the booking position. I'd really like for you to come to Atlanta and be my booker. And so Jerry's told me this story a couple of times, but he says, well, Jim, I'm very expensive. And Jim goes, well, what's expensive, Jerry? He goes, I want $500 a day, and I want to be able to stay in Tennessee, and I want to be able to book the western half of Tennessee like I've been booking, and I'll come to Atlanta and book Atlanta, and I want $500 a day for the days I'm in Atlanta. And Jim just like, peanuts, my boy, peanuts, my boy. And so he hires him, and Jerry starts coming to Atlanta. He takes over for Watts. Watts goes to Florida, and Jerry starts booking Atlanta in December of 1973.
And then Barnett, when does he end up getting out of Australia himself?
That same time. So he searches around and he finds a buyer in Hawaii named Tony Coloni, and he sells Australia to Tony Coloni. And they have a pretty good 1973.
Now, give us a little background on Tony Coloni.
Well, he was there. Al Karasek, the longtime Hawaii promoter, got into a little bit of a wrestling war with Ed Francis in Hawaii. and Al Karasik passed away in 1965, and Ed Francis, after a time, wanted to get out of Hawaii, and Tony Coloni kind of was there to do that, but he never really was very successful, and he ended up buying Barnett's Australia territory and going over there.
You
And
have
so,
any clue on what the price you got for it?
no, I could research that. I really wasn't thinking about that too much when I was doing prep for this show because I was focused more on what Barnett paid paid Lester, to come back to the States.
And Ed Francis was the father of Bill Francis, the Hall of Fame, I guess the Hall of
Mhm.
Fame, All Pro guard, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had two
yeah.
sons that wrestled. Yeah, yeah,
And he's
Bill
an
and I can't
NFL
remember the
player
other.
out of Atlanta. Unbelievable lineman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big,
Yeah.
big, tough guy. Really big. Uh,
And
Um,
and and and,
so
and he was also in a battle royal with the football players at the
that's right. Yeah,
Cardinals.
yeah, yeah. He was a boy. He was a grown man.
It was
Woo.
a stud, man. It was
Yeah,
a
he was a
stud.
stud. He was a stud. That guy could play football, man. That was a
I
man.
kind of I kind of left this story out of it too. I guess when they got over the everybody changing the office locks, and when Anne finally reaches her breaking point or whatever, her daughter tells the story that Anne drove out to the middle of the cemetery in her Cadillac in a driving rainstorm. This sounds like it could be a movie. She drives out in a driving blinding thunderstorm and goes out to Ray Gunkel's grave and kneels down on his grave in the middle of the mud and the rain and everything and says, by God, as my God judge, I will never let the Welches win this. And so that's why she gets going in her competition with All South.
So this is when Barnett packs up and leaves Australia.
Yep. He buys Lester out and pays $268,000 for Lester's 38%. And he also gets it's 20% of Florida, I think. He gets
Yeah, I think
20% of
so.
Florida. And
So he's the conquering hero coming back.
Yeah,
well,
he's everywhere that he wanted to be at
yeah,
this time.
and he's kind of known as, and I put it in here somewhere, I can't remember where it is, but Ronnie Garvin calls him the Godfather. He's like, well, the
Yeah.
Godfather of wrestling is coming and he's going to fix all this. Like, he's the
Because everywhere
fixer.
he's been, he has been unbelievably successful. He's printed money everywhere he's been. I mean,
Yeah.
since the beginning with Kohler, he's printed money everywhere.
Now, another important thing that's not going to be important in today's show, but it's going to be important in the show we're going to have coming up that involves Mr. Briscoe, is that when Watts came into Georgia to book Georgia, he got 10% of Georgia Company.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Watts is holding 10 points in the Georgia office, even when he leaves, right? And when he goes to Florida, he owns 10% of Georgia to 1982. And that's going to be very, very crucial in the future.
That's a big tripping point on the administration's part there.
Right. And then the other thing that's important here is that Jack Briscoe is given 10% or buys in for 10% of the Georgia office because they need help in Georgia.
What it was, they needed help. Jack was the upcoming babyface, so Eddie gave Jack the opportunity. You can leave Florida and you go up there and you'll be a percentage owner, you'll be a part owner in the business there. And Jack, I mean, in the very beginning, that's the side of the ledger we always wanted to be on. And so Jack took Eddie up. So Jack was given 10%. I think Tim Woods and Buddy Colt, all the top guys that they ended up with were given options of buying stock, and some of them were gifted stock. And I think Tim was, that's how I ended up with Tim's stock. He was gifted some stock, and I ended up with Tim's stock. And then Buddy Colt had the accident, and I ended up with Buddy stock after that.
Now there's two, like there is two sides to every story. There's two ways that you can look at this whole thing, right? And I've heard people take different sides. There's one side that says, boy, those terrible, treacherous thieves stole the company right out from under Ann, and they took the company away and cut her out of what she was really the rightful owner of because they shut the company down and started a new company that didn't have her in it. And all that's true, right? But you also got to think about that when this emotional stuff is going on. I've seen this happen a million times where it just gets out of control, right? Who knows if it could have eventually been worked out, if everybody would have kept cool about it, if everybody would have been not so emotional. But it just got it was like a raging fire. Everybody's just getting mad and upset and going out to cemeteries and making vows, and guys going into parking lot about to have seizures and passing out from being so. I mean, it was out of control. So sure, a lot of emotional things probably happened, and it got to the point where, from Eddie Graham's perspective, it's like, hey, we don't have anybody in Georgia except two wrestlers, and if this competition ends up putting us out of business, they'll be over here where I am in Florida next. Like, they won't stop in Atlanta. They won't stop in Georgia. If they beat us in Georgia, it's a Civil War general talking, right?
Yeah.
If they beat us in Chattanooga, they're going to be in Atlanta, right? I mean, it's that all over again. So he's thinking, I got to put something together to close this down or stop this or whatever. And if she's going to do that, and granted, they did what they did, but then she threw fire and gas on the fire by starting up against them, not just in Atlanta. Like, she took their promoter in Augusta. She took their promoter in a bunch of different towns.
Right.
And the war was on. And so Eddie's thinking, they're gonna come on down here, when this is done. So he's thinking, we got to stop it in Atlanta. And he gives Jack the shares to help stop it. He gives Watts some shares to help stop it, and then calls in the firepower of the National Wrestling Alliance to bring talent in, right. And they still have the advantage. I mean, you got to think about this. They still have the advantage because all the talent they have over at Ann's office, the Georgia fans know all of them.
They were over.
Right? They were over. All the guys coming in from the NWA, yeah, I saw them in a magazine, but I don't know who they are. So they were kind of on their heels a little bit, if that makes sense.
Before Jack got to, he had never been in Atlanta. I mean, that was his first foray into Atlanta when all this started happening. So he wasn't over, is what I'm saying,
And do you know, a little aggression before we get completely out of Australia, the association with Barnett and Rupert Murdoch, do you have much about it? Was there much of association there, or was
yeah, they stayed friends for the rest of their lives. Yeah, they sure did. And there's some, and I said we'd get back to that. We can say a little bit about that now. I mean, because Jim Barnett is going to have such a close relationship with Ted Turner, it's going to put a little bit of pressure on his relationship with Rupert Murdoch, because them two dudes don't like each other.
Right.
I mean, they don't like each other at all. Almost like Vince and Ted Turner don't like each other. I mean, the same kind of deal, right? Rupert and Ted Turner do not get along.
Or Ted Turner and Ray Gunkel.
Yeah, that's right.
For reasons.
For all kinds of reasons.
And we will get into that here in a really crucial part where they have an incident away from wrestling that's going to really affect things, Rupert and Ted.
But Murdoch, he's starting television down in Australia, and when he got in the 90s, everybody said what a big mistake he made when they said he overpaid for the NFL and Major League Baseball. He didn't overpay; it's what made his company. But he knew how valuable live entertainment was. Now everybody realizes that. Rupert was way ahead on this. And I just think that he got a lot of that either from Jim Barnett or from the relationship, because he got it, and that's what made his television station in Australia. So he understood it very well, either Barnett's, the association, or just by luck, the fact that this is how it ended up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Jerry told me, and it's in his book too, but I mean, he told me a couple of times that the only reason he took the Atlanta job was he really liked Eddie and Buddy. Like he liked Eddie Graham and he liked Buddy Fuller, and they needed help. And he told him he'd talked to Barnett about the job, but he didn't take the job because of Barnett. He took the job because of Eddie and Buddy, and to help out. And he told Barnett, he said, "I'm not going to be there long. Like, he said, I'll get it up and going, and I'll book the shows, and I'll arrange the talent, and I'll get you rolling. But then once that's over, I'm going to be done." And he didn't always get along with Barnett. I mean, they had some knockdown dragouts, and Jerry'd just say, "Okay, that's it. I'm done. Going back to Nashville," and he'd go back to Nashville, and a couple of days go by, and Jim be, "Oh, my boy, I'm sorry. Please, forgive me. Come on back to Atlanta. I need you. You're my genius booker." So
my boy.
Yeah. So it's right there at the end of 73 too, where, and a lot of people know about this, Gary Hart's book's been out of print for a long time, but there's a story in there about Gary Hart and Jerry Jarrett where Gary Hart's talking about those Tennessee hillbillies in the bathroom stall when Jerry walks in, and Jerry hears him, and he's questioning Jerry's lineage, what to say, and he comes out, and Jerry fires him, and Gary goes to Barnett and goes, "Hey, this blonde-headed kid from Tennessee, he says I'm fired." And Barnett goes, "Well, if he says you're fired, my boy." So so Jerry and Gary never really hit it off.
Yeah, if Gary Hart could have played well with others, he could have been a major player.
Yeah.
Gary he left Texas the same thing over the Von Erich payoff, Freebird payoff, and some different stuff, which he didn't have to do. Gary didn't always play well with others. I loved Gary. I thought I got along really well with Gary, but
yeah, I enjoyed him.
Play well at times with others.
Yeah, I enjoyed him. I enjoyed him being so honest. This is, I know we've been going for a while, but he turned Fritz Von Erich babyface. Did you know that? Gary Hart turned him babyface because he went on live Dallas television and exposed him on TV. He goes, "Yeah, he don't speak German. Like, he's not a real German. He's Jack Adkisson. He's a big time football player." Well, they hit the ceiling down there. They thought, "Man, you have killed our biggest babyface," and it just got Fritz over more. When people found out he was really a Texan, he was really from there, it made him the biggest babyface in Texas.
People never considered it concealment or anything, or something that was bad. Because he was where I was from in East Texas. He was close there, the Von Erich Ranch. Oh, it's Jack Adkins. He lives over here. It's his real name. People just thought it was great.
Yeah,
people didn't say, "Oh, he's playing something that he's not." It was so cool. People just loved the inside information on him.
Yeah, he's from Denton. Yeah, we know him. He's over here in Denton. Yeah, but Gary did. He just went out there and I think Bronco Lubitsch and Danny Pletchis, were the bookers, and they just about tore the TV studio down, upset that he did that, and then they selling out everywhere, because everybody's backing him because he's over as a babyface.
Your brother, your brother.
Well, Tony, give us a little teaser about what's in our third episode coming up.
Yeah, so the Atlanta Wrestling War is going to come to an end. We're going to talk about how that happens. We're going to talk about Jerry being the booker in Atlanta. We're going to talk about 75, which is a really crucial year because that's the year Sam Mushnick finally backs out of the National Wrestling Alliance. We're going to talk about WTBS changing call letters and becoming a satellite television station that Ted Turner was telling Buddy Fuller back there in the 60s was going to happen, that they laughed and thought that was crazy. It's actually going to happen in 1976. And then WTBS and Georgia Championship Wrestling is going to be able to be seen in more of the country. So we're going to have some more paradigm changes. Even though they're going to change, they're going to look familiar, right? It's going to look like it has before. It's just going to be in a different form.
Different names.
Then we're going to have a big deal that Mr. Brisco was involved in, which all these people that are buying into the
camper set,
all these people that are buying in ownership points in the Atlanta office, that's really going to come into play in the early 80s, which is going to lead to Black Saturday and everybody just not wanting to talk to Mr. Brisco anymore. That's all coming in our next episode.
It ended up where all my only friends were from Texas. I can't figure that
out. In Kentucky. I'd have talked to you.
Kentucky. Okay, thank you.
And then Barnett also ends up in WWE. I mean, there's all three parts of this. He's an integral part, and he's a rainmaker everywhere he's been.
Yeah, he's gonna be part of the crew that goes with Mr. Brisco to work for Mr. McMahon. That Black Saturday, Mr. Barnett's in on that. He's gonna be up there in the WWE office, WBF, and then he's gonna turn around and make a deal for another guy to buy something, and then he's gonna make a deal for another guy to buy something, and he's gonna be in it all the way to the end. He's going to be
a fascinating character.
He's going to be in it all the way up till Jim Crockett sells out. Yeah. So
this is modern day wrestling. I mean, this is how we got the product that we're today. I was telling this story kind of takes you on that pathway there to what the business has become now, this multi-billion, not million, but billion-dollar industry worldwide that we're seeing. And it all traces back to James G. Barnett, my boy.
Yeah, and some other guys.
Yeah.
Well, guys, part 3 is coming up. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.